My name's Kiera, and alongside my colleague Sophie, will be your host for this masterclass on the basics of copywriting. So a bit of an intro, we're two copywriters currently working in financial services, and between us, we've written for a whole host of different industries. Now that includes interiors, fashion, virtual reality, architecture, stationery, poetry, medicine, business psychology, and plumbing, because even plumbers need to be able to market their services. And now I'm going to hand over to Sophie to kick us off with a quick definition of copywriting.
So, put bluntly, copywriting is really just the occupation of writing text for adverts or publicity material. Its purpose is to increase brand awareness and ultimately, hopefully, persuade somebody to do something. Essentially, it's about writing for a commercial purpose. So what we're going to talk about throughout this presentation is, why does copywriting matter? Why can't anybody write anything and leave it at that? And what makes something good or bad, and who decides? So hopefully we're going to answer some of those questions and give you some tools and devices to make your copywriting stronger.
But first, before we get into our 7 copywriting tips, we'd like to spend a little bit more time talking about Ethical Angel. So some of you on this call might already know about Ethical Angel, but for those who are new, as Natu said, it's a free virtual marketplace for causes, and that's things like charities, NGOs, and social enterprises. So you can order projects suited to your needs and connect with business employees like us, people who are keen to share their knowledge and insight with you. And Ethical Angel will match you with business employees who are called angels based on their skills and interests to help you find people who really share your passion for what you do. Now you can get one-on-one support, or you can enlist a small team of angels to complete your projects. So as we've heard there, it's a really great way to link up with business professionals to bridge a skills gap where you might have one in your organisation. And speaking personally, I've completed a couple of projects on the platform, which I found to be really fun. That included 2 instances of writing new website copy and 1 instance of editing a newspaper for a charity. Now, all of these were great experiences, and even better, it benefits both the causes and the angel who helps them. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, we've rounded up 3 copywriting projects that you're able to order on the Ethical Angel platform. So up first, we have Campaign Copywriter, where you'll get support for your marketing campaigns. Up next, we have the Website Copy Redraft, which is a great one if you want to give your website copy a bit of a refresh. And finally, we have the General Project Copywriter. So if what you're looking for doesn't fit into those other categories, you can select this one and get a copywriter to help you with whatever you need. So without further ado, we're going to get into our copywriting tips. And the first one is, do write with flair, but if you're not sure about something, it's probably best to leave it out. And we've got a quote from one of the experts, William Faulkner, who says, get it down, take chances. It may be bad, but that's the only way you can do anything really good. And we've also decided to look at a few ads which incorporate writing with flair and use it to great effect. So when we look at both of these ads, they've used humour to create something playful. On the left, we have Emily's Snacks. Now, their first ever ad campaigns were scheduled to run this year during lockdown. They spent a lot of money to get physical ad space in an area where there usually would have been high footfall. And instead, the ad would only be seen by the occasional runner and a pigeon, which features in that photo there. So they had an opportunity. They could cancel the ad, or they could revise their copy to suit the situation. They decided to do the latter, and they turned this new campaign around in less than a week, which is really impressive. When asked about it at the time, their creative director believed that it would create more impact and get more cut through than the original creative. That's because it's so relevant, it's of the moment, and it's having a bit of fun. And he says people want a bit of humour right now, and that's what will allow this campaign to resonate. Likewise, another ad from this year, Specsavers. This plays on the usual trope, which is often seen in their TV ads, of not being able to see things clearly. But they've tied that into current world news, which is again so powerful simply because everyone can relate to it. So hopefully those ads have demonstrated what's possible by writing with flair, which leads me on to my 3 key pieces of advice for you all. So first, you can use humour and be playful when you're writing. People often think that copy needs to be serious and formal, when in fact some of the most successful campaigns, as we've seen in that previous slide, have smashed traditional expectations and even taken a few liberties. And that ties into what we mean by writing with flair. At the crux of it, you're writing something that shows your passion for the subject. And sure, you might not be professional writers, but passion for your organisations is something you all have by the bucket load. After all, you wouldn't have committed to improving your skills in this masterclass if that wasn't the case. So secondly, remember that you can always be guided by the circumstance. Yes, humour can be the right thing for one campaign, but it could easily spell disaster for another. You wouldn't want to get that kind of humorous, playful copy when you're trying to sort out the affairs of a loved one who's recently passed away, would you? Which leads me on to my third and final point: consider your audience. Cast your net wide to be conscious of how your writing might translate to a range of different age groups. And don't forget people who might not have English as a first language. These are all factors you'll need to take into consideration when writing. What might seem innocent to you could be construed negatively by someone else. So it's best to be thinking about that from the outset. And so to wrap up this point, write with flair, have fun with it, but make sure you've done your due diligence too.
And so next, our second piece of advice is don't forget the power that your brand voice can have and really learn how to use it. And for this, we've got a quote from Dan Whedon, who's the ad exec who founded Whedon and Kennedy. And he was the person who coined "just do it," Nike's famous phrase. And he said, Nike didn't discover the power of advertising. They discovered the power of their own voice. Here are two other brands who've done that really, really successfully. The first is Innocent Smoothies, who have somehow managed to turn something as mundane as squashed fruit into a really playful, wry, irreverent brand. We all have seen their ads on the tube. You'll have seen the little knitted hats that they do over Christmas. They've just taken an idea and run with it. And I love how simple this advert is. List of ingredients, fruit. Well, that was boring. They've got their own little playful twist, but they've still driven home the fact that the only thing they put in their smoothies is fruit, and that's their USP. Next up, we've got Cancer Research, who did a cracking array of ads actually over the last few years. I loved their obesity one where they left out a couple of letters. They really make you think. They're super consistent. And yeah, they've got a really, really strong brand voice. So what is a brand voice? Well, it's really the personality that your company portrays. Don't be fooled into thinking that it's only made up of the words and pictures that you use, because it's something that, done right, is really far greater than the sum of its parts. It's how you tell story and how you evoke emotion. It's how you convey your philosophy, your values, your culture. It's how you can create differentiation, leave an impact, and build customer loyalty. Ultimately, it's the way that you build a bridge between the metaphysical and the human. That's between your business and your customer. In our digital age, brand identity has become even more prevalent. Where once your brand would have been known by door-to-door salespeople and shopkeepers and stall owners, today's most successful brands are actually represented by people that we'll never get to meet. So how do you strengthen yours and break out from the pack? Well, my first piece of advice is to be consistent. Think about how your friends would feel if you changed your personal brand every day, if you told stories that were insipid or hard to understand, if your personality was really jokey one second and really melancholy the next, if you were harassing them 1 minute and the next day you just disappeared. They might look back and say, I've got the occasional fond memory with that person, but I don't really feel like I've built a lasting relationship. Well, the same goes for your business. In fact, consistent presentation of your brand will increase its revenue by up to 33%. So that's your brand's values, your imagery, and your messaging staying consistent across every channel and communication. It's because as humans, we don't like change or surprise. Just look at the government in 2020. But someone who builds consistency will build trust and recognition. So speaking of consistency, it's just important to remember that your brand identity isn't a part-time consideration. It has to be thick, resilient, and absolute for a customer to really feel like they're getting to know you. As a team, Kiera and I, one of the ways that we build our brand voice is through a really robust style guide. It's treated as a single source of truth. It's like a Bible, and we argue that there's nothing too small or insignificant to go in it. From general ways of writing to commas, capitals, hyphens, ours is a really, really frequent source of healthy debate. It's something we talk about almost daily. And it really ensures clarity in our own team, and it encourages autonomy amongst other people, and it really makes us evolve our writing skills ourselves. My second piece of advice would be to be authentic. It's a really crucial building block for a brand voice, because we know that customers can see through brands that fake an interest in a social concern, and they're willing to follow up on promises that people don't keep. So being insincere will do more damage than saying nothing at all. One of the ways that you can overcome this is to always be honest. Doing something as simple as saying sorry when you've done something wrong is a really easy way to win people over. And part of that authenticity is to avoid tokenism. So you don't want to look like you're just ticking a box or doing something because you feel like you should. One of the ways that you can mitigate that is always staying true to your brand values and really humanizing your brand. And lastly, to make sure that you're always focusing on the value that you add to a customer, not the value that you're adding to yourself. And the third tip is to always be clear. Lots of companies find it really difficult to explain what they do and how they do it. But frankly, nobody wants to buy something that they don't understand. It takes someone just 0.05 seconds to form an impression of your website. So it's really important that you make it easy, you make it clear, and that you make it fun. One of the ways that you can improve this clarity is by personalizing your content. So if you can effectively harness data and insights and create a better customer experience that's really relevant to somebody, you will improve your relationship with them. Used well, it'll help them feel like they've really got to know you, while removing obstacles or information that they simply don't want to know about. Basically, it's a win-win. So those are my 3 pieces of advice for a really, really good brand voice. Be consistent, be authentic, and be clear.
Perfect. And I'll come back with, do know your audience and write to them. And the quote we have for this one is from John Steinbeck, another great. Forget your generalized audience. In the first place, the nameless, faceless audience will scare you to death. And in the second place, unlike the theatre, it doesn't exist. In writing, your audience is one single reader. I have found that sometimes it helps to pick out one person, a real person you know, or an imagined person, and write to that one. So the example we've chosen for this tip is NatWest's Pledge to Women campaign from 2019. Now, you might remember this one for the controversy it caused when it was released. And that's because for many people, it came across as hugely patronising, to the extent that there were articles written about it. Some of the words used to describe the campaign include sexist, tone deaf, mansplaining finances. The idea behind the campaign was that NatWest wanted to lead the change in the way that banks talk to women and to enable them to speak more confidently about their finances. Now, unfortunately, they included a picture of a man in a bowler hat and suit called Mr. Banker, who was holding out a bouquet of flowers to female customers. All in all, it was a bit of a fail. This was a classic example of not knowing your audience. And when copywriting, this is a huge deal. You should be tailoring all of your communications to your target audience and writing with them in mind. Who was NatWest writing to in this instance? Well, it's female customers. But it seems to me that the campaign focused on women as one entity, one big conglomerate mass. And in that way, the ad only served to alienate them further. Not to mention the complete lack of images of empowered women, for example. What we were given was the rather unnerving Mr. Banker. As the quote from Steinbeck said in the previous slide, it can help to think of your target audience as encapsulated in just one person, one ideal person for your brand. Ask yourself what they'd want to hear from you and how they'd want it to be said. And you can even imagine having a direct conversation with them, because it's important to write in a voice that's human and doesn't sound too robotic or formal or abrupt. And what ties into this is thinking about their pain points, which is an idea that some of you might have heard of before. Simply put, it's something that's causing your audience or your reader pain or a problem for them, which is what you're seeking to resolve. And to get that resolution from them, you need to decide what the main thing is that would induce them to act. For example, to donate to your cause or to volunteer their time. And once you've identified that, another quick win is to use the active voice when you're writing rather than the passive voice. What I mean by this is an example of the active voice is I did my homework, and the equivalent using the passive would be my homework was done. And it's as simple as that. But when you make this kind of quick change, you see the difference instantly in the way that your copy flows. It just sounds better to the reader. That's because you've placed the emphasis on the subject of the sentence, which in my example was I or me. Of course, that didn't really come across as much in the passive example. Now, finally, and most of all, you need to trust your audience. Too often, we're bombarded with multiple calls to action on the web page, multiple instances of copy that pretty much says the same thing. Now, cut that down, but if you say it once and say it right, you can be sure that your audience will get the message.
And so onto our next piece of advice, which is don't ignore your purpose for writing. We're going to start off with a little quote from Vonnegut, which is, give your readers as much information as possible, as soon as possible. To hell with suspense. Readers should have such a complete understanding of what's going on, where and why, they could finish the story themselves should cockroaches eat the last few pages. I appreciate that he's talking about creative writing there, but he makes a really, really interesting point. To write great content, it's crucial to first understand why you're writing it. So we're going to touch on a little bit of content strategy here. You really want to think about who's it for? How are you going to deliver it? What stage is it at in a customer's journey? What does it mean for them? Where will it be displayed? And sometimes you have to be really honest with yourself. Is its purpose just to serve me? One of the ways that you can answer those sorts of questions and improve your own content strategy is by making sure you write a really solid brief. You can ask questions like, who's your target audience and what do you want them to do? Do you have customer feedback or research or data to back up your content request? Do you actually have the budget to deliver this? What channels is it going to go out on? And how does it tie into your other communications? What are your key deadlines? Who needs to be involved? And probably the most important one, what are you actually hoping to achieve and how are you going to measure it? By spending your time narrowing down the brief up front, you will deliver content that's meaningful, purposeful, and effective. It'll also help you stick to the task at hand once you get writing. And I believe so strongly in this that I would say even if somebody isn't going to brief you and you're doing the work by yourself, write your own brief. Pretend that somebody has come to you with a plan or a proposal and hold yourself accountable to it. It's essentially like planning an A-level essay. My next piece of advice would be, once you've found this purpose, this magical purpose, you want to deliver it. So there are a few ways that you can make yourself stick to it. And one of those ways is by really narrowing down the choice that you're giving people, which is something that Kiera's just touched on. So I want to talk to you about a little experiment. In a study in the year 2000, there were two psychologists, Sheena and Mark from Stanford, and they created a stand selling jam in a supermarket, which is why we've got this wonderful illustration of some jam. Their stands offered either 6 jams for sale or 24 jams for sale. And they found that even though 28% more customers stopped at the stands with 24 jams, shoppers were 10 times more likely to actually buy one when there were only 6 varieties on offer. Here, the sheer volume of choice that they had made picking jam difficult and onerous, and frankly, just led to customers walking away. With the same premise, if you send a customer an email with multiple links and calls to action, you're essentially creating a maze. Every single one of those links or calls to action is an opportunity for them to do something that you don't really want them to do. In fact, it's making them less and less likely to convert at all. So it's really important to remember that your customers aren't mind readers. If you know your purpose and you want them to do something, tell them what it is and don't give them any other choice. And my last piece of advice, I'm going to carry on here, is to remember that good copy won't solve bad design. So as a really quick question, a little experiment for the group, I want you to estimate when you send somebody an email, a donor maybe, or a client, or somebody who's signed up to your mailing list, how long do you think that they are likely to read your email for? What is the average time that somebody is going to be engaged with a piece of content that you sent them? And if you can write the answers in the chat box, just give you like 30 seconds, instinct, what do you think? And I'm hoping that Lucy might read out some answers for us. Anonymously, that's absolutely fine.
I can see we've got some answers from a lot of people.
Have we? What's the kind of ballpark?
Yeah, we're getting some really good answers here. I mean, there's a lot of 30s, there's a lot of 10s, a few 5 to 10 seconds.
Someone said 0.5 seconds.
Yeah, 0.5 seconds, minutes, 8 seconds, 2 minutes.
Nice.
So quite a range there.
Well, good. And that's really interesting. I personally would have thought it was quite a lot of time because I sit and read my emails, but then I have to remember that I'm a reader and not everybody might enjoy reading their emails as much as I do. The actual average time is 11.1 seconds in an email. For a website's written content, it's half that. So it's 5.59 seconds. That's a couple of blinks. It's a really small amount of time that you've got to engage somebody. So it makes it even more important to distill what it is that you're truly writing about. It's another reason that I believe so strongly that good copy won't solve bad design. Copy and design go hand in hand. Done well, they will create a seamless and delightful user experience. And done badly, you can be left feeling like you're trying to fill in your tax return. People often ask which one should come first. It's one of the questions that I get asked the most. But the truth is that a really beautiful user experience treat copy and design as constantly evolving entities that complement and support each other. They are the ultimate chicken and egg. What we know for sure is that good copy won't ever solve bad design. So if you're writing and that you feel like your purpose is clunky or difficult to communicate, it is sometimes worth just stepping back and wondering if actually it's not a copy problem at all. Could it become easier to deliver your message if you looked at redesigning the page? And here's a really lovely example for where copy and design have worked beautifully to support behavioral economics concept, which we call the magic middle. It's the idea that we feel the safest in our middle ground. So here, by placing the value of £5 in the middle, WaterAid have managed to make it feel like a very reasonable donation. £2 looks light, £10 looks heavy, but £5 is kind of the Goldilocks in the middle. What about if they change their lowest value to 50p, the middle value to £1, and the highest value to £5? Suddenly, £5 is feeling really expensive. In fact, it's exactly the same value. So what they've done is guide the user right to where they want them to be, which is the £5 in the middle. They've given this even more strength by explaining specifically what each of those values is going to do. This is how they've humanized their brand. So I know that by donating £5, I've purchased a locally made hand pump for a village. One thing they could have done to make this even stronger is to make it something called the default. So they could have highlighted this so that as a user, I could potentially do one less thing. I might not even have to click on it. I could just click continue to next step, and I would have done the exact thing that they wanted me to do. So with almost no copy at all, they've delivered their purpose, which is really fantastic. And it goes to show that great design and great copy working hand in hand is one of the most forefront things that's going to really, really make your customer convert. So to sum up, these are your tools and devices for finding your purpose: sticking to the brief, delivering on that purpose, taking away any risk of choice paralysis, and always remembering that good copy won't solve bad design. So thank you for a little interactive moment recently. We are going to throw out another one because you've been listening for 25 minutes and you probably are starting to check out. So we're going to make you check back in. This is a little game. It's a kind of elevator pitch exercise. And what we want you to do is think of any film. It could be your favourite film, one that you saw last weekend, it doesn't matter. And we want you to describe that film in just 6 words. So to give you an example, I'll use my favourite film, Chicken Run. I know my sister's on the line and she's an equally avid fan. And the way that I would describe it is The Great Escape, but with chickens. I'll give you one more example, just in case you're not sure how it works. Country Cop challenges the greater good. And it's, of course, Hot Fuzz. So we'd love you to take just a minute, think of a film, any film, 6 words in the comments box, and then maybe we'll try and guess them together and see what people come up with. And I can't see the comments box. So Lucy or Kiera, if anyone's seeing any good ones, start reading them out. I want to know.
Yeah, we've got quite a few.
Yeah. So shall I go ahead and read some out for you guys?
Yeah, what have we got?
So we've got 1 policeman and 1 burning man.
Oh my God, this is where we find out that I've seen 3 films.
No, I'm not sure either. Oh, this is a good one. Boy sets traps for bumbling burglars.
Oh, Home Alone.
Yes.
Love the alliteration there.
Bumbling burglars, that's gold.
Very good.
That is great. Human elf, this is a festive one. Human elf searched for his dad.
Is that Elf?
Yeah.
Again, not seen it, but Will Ferrell.
A prison escape with Rita Hayworth.
Shawshank. Good
Oh,
one.
nice.
Great. Green swamp monster wins princess's heart.
Oh, Shrek. Love
Love
Yeah.
that one.
Rich man rescues beautiful cool girl.
Oh, Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman.
Yeah. Another festive one. 2 women swap lives over Christmas.
Is that The Holiday?
Yeah. The Holiday.
Yeah.
Do you want some more, or are you happy?
I mean, I'm made up with that. Thank you so much for the contribution.
Thank you, everyone, for taking part in this.
Not laughing at us that we haven't seen any films. But there is a point to it. The point is that you've managed to just distill a couple of hours of a film into 6 words. So imagine taking that same kind of approach to your writing. Not only have you cut back on a whole load of waffle without even realizing it, and ultimately distilled the purpose of the film, you've shown how, frankly, none of us ever have an excuse for a generic subject line. You've made something really, really exciting in just 6 words. So why not take that approach to the next piece of micro copy that you've got to write? And we will move, with that in mind, onto our next piece of advice, which is definitely feel free to write freely when you write your first draft, but always get a peer review. And this is because we really can't talk about copywriting without talking about editing. They are 2 sides of the same coin, and you cannot have one without the other. That said, you might find that depending on your personality type, you naturally drift towards writing freely and that kind of creative writing experience, or you might find that you're more pensive, you're more meticulous, and you're a bit more of an editor. I'd argue that even though our titles are copywriters, as a team, we spend more time writing than we spend more time editing than we do writing. Our process is that we get a brief, which we sort of talked about. We would write a first draft. I would send it to a fellow writer. I would take their notes. I would take those back and consolidate them. It then goes to stakeholders. We take their feedback, consolidate that. Then we go up to our functions, our teams that are going to make sure that what we're writing is safe and sound, consolidate those changes and come back. And there may even, again, be further rounds. And at any point during that process, I might go back to another writer and ask for more support. So it's fair to say that giving and receiving feedback and collaborating is very much a part of our daily routine. But why edit? Well, as Hemingway says, the first draft of anything is shit, and I can't disagree. Here are two examples of adverts that perhaps could have used a second opinion. There's the Protein World advert from 2015. This was actually banned in the UK, but it did go stateside to equally receive basically an equally low response. The problems are kind of right in front of you. And actually, I sat and read some feedback about this, and I think the worst piece of customer feedback that I saw was, I feel bad for my future daughter. And I thought, any advert that can make a citizen say that as they're walking past a billboard surely needs to ask some questions about its intent. And the second one here is not a great big advert, just an email. Just an email. Do you think, how much damage can that really do? This one was sent in 2013, and we can only imagine that the social media team at Adidas probably scheduled it before they went home for the weekend and pushed it live without much thought. It said, "Congrats, you survived the Boston Marathon." And yes, it was the year of the Boston bombings. So perhaps a second look might have mitigated what was probably quite a lot of brand damage, even in just a few words. So we know that reviewing is important, and whether that's our own work or somebody else's, it should be something that you're doing most days as a writer. So we wanted to put together 3 ways that you can up your editing game. The first one is that when it comes to reviewing someone else's work or sharing your own, it's really important to lose your ego, because great copywriting isn't about being right. I think we all have an idea of writing something really amazing, and a client or a donor writing in and saying, "Gosh, that copy was excellent and it's changed my life." And then the CEO comes in and they give you a pat on the back, and then a promotion, obviously, and a pay rise, and it's really just some kind of path to fame and success. Well, I've been a professional writer for years, and it still hasn't happened to me. And what I have seen is the unbelievable impact that being part of a team can have. So you must use your teammates, share your knowledge and your passion and your ideas. And one of the ways that you can do this really effectively is by putting the customer at the front and center of what you do, because by creating a common goal, you will remove any need for your own ego. It means it's no longer about being right, it's about doing right by them. My second piece of advice is to learn how to give and receive feedback. When you give feedback, it's really important not to be vague and not to be personal. So the worst phrases that I see are things like, "It's not good," or "I don't like it." What you want to do instead is be objective, be clear, be constructive, consolidate what you're trying to say, provide alternatives if you can, ask questions, and give your time. It's really important that if you've found a solution, tell somebody else what that is. They don't need to sit there and do the guesswork, and they don't need to go home and feel bad about what they've written. In terms of the method, I'd say just find one that works for you. Maybe it's using comments, maybe it's over email, maybe it's sitting down and having a face-to-face meeting. But what you must see it as is an opportunity to learn from each other and find a resolution together, because I can promise you that whatever it is, it will be better than the answer that you would have found on your own. And that's the real glory. I'd also say that giving rationale is unbelievably important when you edit somebody's work. It's one of the easiest ways to get somebody to take your ideas on board while protecting a relationship. It's also another reason that the style guide that I spoke about earlier is so important, because it gives you a single source of truth and rationale to defend your ideas by. It basically removes hierarchy by creating something that's greater than you. And lastly, I would say, find what works for you. If you're editing your own work in particular, maybe you're doing some creative writing at home or doing something in your own time, I would just say, remember that it's a really personal process. You know, Steinbeck believed in writing freely and as rapidly as possible, never ever correcting or rewriting till the whole thing's down. Winterson also believed in never ever stopping, and Jack Kerouac wrote some of his novels on one single scroll that was completely unchanged. But Henry Miller believes in always stopping in the appointed time and taking a break. For me, I'm a huge believer that your subconscious needs a lot of space to do the work, and given the time, it will do the work for you. So if you can, give yourself plenty of time after you've looked at a problem to step back, think about it subconsciously, and remember that you won't always be in the mood. All that's to say, there is no recipe, there is no exact right way to do it. It's definitely a personal process, and you must find what works for you. And next, I'm going to hand over to Kiera to talk about the joys of jargon.
Thank you. Fab stuff, Sophie. So the next one is don't get bogged down by jargon. And the quote we have chosen for this is from a very aptly titled book called Consequences of Erudite Vernacular, Utilised Irrespective of Necessity, Problems with Using Long Words Needlessly. And they say, when it comes to writing, most experts agree that clarity, simplicity, and parsimony are ideals that authors should strive for. The pundits are likely right. Write clearly and simply if you can, and you'll be more likely to be thought of as intelligent. So the ad example we used for this tip is a drinks brand called Babe Rosé, and it's quite a nifty little ad. So not only have they used one of our earlier copywriting tips, that of writing with flair and making it playful, they've tackled yet another important issue. And it's something that Sophie and I often run into in our day job. You're told that you have to have something worded in a specific way for legal reasons, such as the important terms and conditions. But in this ad, Babe Rosé have brilliantly turned this on its head. If we follow the asterisk, we can see that their copy says 21 plus only, duh. So in doing so, they've got the important point across. They offer something for literally everyone, but of course you need to be over 21 to drink alcohol in the US, which is where this brand's from. I'm sure we can all picture the bottom of an ad where there's typically lines and lines of very formal sounding T's and C's. But the lesson here is to not take jargon for granted. Often you can change more than you think. In this case, the jargon's been scrapped in favour of something that adds a little more human touch, and it works brilliantly. So we're going to talk a little bit about what jargon is anyway. It can be defined as any words or expressions that are hollow or devoid of any real meaning. You might think something looks and sounds good on the surface, but there's no real substance to it. It's lazy writing that often gets in the way of communicating real value. And when thinking about the overuse of jargon in our daily lives, my mind immediately turns to Donald Trump. Now, he's a controversial figure, but he exemplifies this idea perfectly. Don't know if anyone can remember the cod thief incident, for example, which is a classic way of using jargon in an attempt to sound intelligent, when in fact that word was completely made up. Which is usually the problem. With jargon, you always run the risk of using that word incorrectly, and it's a surefire way to destroy any copy. Not only that, but you want people to connect with what you're telling them, and that won't happen if you're alienating them with buzzwords or using business speak that doesn't make sense to the layperson. Don't fall victim to the idea that using unnecessarily long words makes you sound more professional. It doesn't. It's much better and much cleverer to explain your complex concepts in short, easy to understand language. That way everyone knows what you're talking about, and you haven't reduced your audience down to people who weren't put off by your hoop-to-doodle, which is a word that's used by Steinbeck to describe superfluous prose. And when we talk about wanting everyone to understand what you're saying, we really do mean everyone. That's because we don't just want to be thinking about the privileged, tech-savvy, able-bodied, white, cisgendered male experience as standard and everything else as other. We need to seek to place the other in the centre of things, and there's a range of ways we can do this. For example, we can make use of descriptive call to action buttons instead of just using click here or find out more. These are things that are of little use to people who use a screen reader, for example. We can also help them by using descriptive headings throughout a web page to make it easier for them to navigate. Have you considered how the use of colour on your website might affect those with colour blindness? And going back to what we said earlier, not everyone who reads your copy will have English as a first language, which is yet another reason to be as clear and concise as possible, because clear language makes your content inclusive. So to sum up, tools and devices, you might be able to change more than you think. Jargon doesn't equal clever. Keep it simple and be accessible. So we're moving on to the next slide. We're going to take a quick break and consolidate what we've learned with another game, since you all did so well with the previous one. So on the next slide, we're going to have some copy that Pizza Hut sent out to their customers after making a purchase. And we think this copy could be written much better, but now it's up to you to change it. So let us know what you think could be changed, removed, or reworded. You can use the chat function, or if you're feeling brave, you might be able to come off mute. And let's have a go at rewriting this thing.
And if you just want to scribble it down on a piece of paper at home, that's absolutely fine. If you want to take a screenshot and have a look at it later, that's okay too. But just thinking about some of those tools that we talked about cutting things down, making things a bit more human. How might you have a little bit of a go? Is there any sentences or words that jump out and just don't feel right to you?
Yeah. And you don't have to do the whole thing either. If there's one thing that you just want to talk about, that's fine. Just pick one or two.
And any typos in there aren't ours. They are completely
100%.
Did it?
So Rebecca has said include the survey in the original email instead of sending two.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point on customer experience, for sure. I don't think anyone's going to be sitting at home counting down the days until the survey pops up. So why are they priming somebody for something rather than just giving it to them in the moment? It's completely true. It's a dodgy journey.
Yeah, and there's another thank you, stay safe, and brackets with the link to the survey. And Media Trust have said surely a copywriter didn't write this ?
I agree with you.
Beth has commented call to action is hard to decipher amongst the huge amount of text. It's too sincere, we are talking pizzas here, ! It could be cut down by about 2 lines plus the link to survey, which is coming up a lot, and scrap the multiple !
Yes, definitely. Good point.
Charlie has said take out for being our valued customer and use their name, less generic and shows they are truly valued.
Yeah, perfect.
And yeah, another general comment on it's too long.
Yeah, I see someone has also said we couldn't miss the opportunity to satisfy your pleasure is an OTT line. Totally agree with you. Yeah, that one needs to go.
I really didn't like that at all. I think we should also say this is a lot of those points are completely valid for an email. This was actually a DM, so it was just a flyer.
It was like a flyer that went through the door.
Yeah, so things like links wouldn't have worked, but there are still definitely opportunities to improve the customer experience. Yeah, I completely agree with the tone one. I think that they've been really over sincere, and then they've tried to compensate for that sincerity with ! Like at the end, I'm going to be really fun, and obviously it's come across as being disjointed, which when we go back to brand voice is exactly what we want to avoid. So Kiera and I took a little shot at making some really quick win changes. Kiera, do you want to talk through them?
Yeah, so we've changed the stuff in orange. I'm sure you can tell that it sounds very different, hopefully. So for starters, as some of you said, we thought thank you for being our valued customer sounded way too formal. We've replaced it with something much more human and conversational, but obviously anything along that kind of line would work. The original copy mentions keeping ourselves and you safe, but that's very wordy when you can just say keep everyone safe, and it also sounds more inclusive when you use that kind of language as well. The line about satisfying your pleasure, which someone else mentioned, got to get rid of that. We chose this one. We know you love our delicious pizzas, which is why we're working hard to keep them coming. So I think that kind of gets the same point across, but in a more human way and doesn't sound kind of odd and clunky. At the end there, we're directing the customer to give feedback in a short survey. Of course, if this was an email, totally take you guys' point that they could just put a link to it. This was a flyer, so it wasn't possible to do that. And the sign off, as some of you said, was kind of strange with on behalf of, which sounded again way too formal, something like a business memorandum on behalf of all of us. So we've changed it to "From all of us at Pizza Hut, thank you and stay safe." And again, getting rid of those superfluous caps and exclamation marks.
Nice. And this is our last piece of advice. So really, this is a way of playing with structure and form, which is one of the ways that you can really make your writing sing. And we've got this fantastic example from Gary Provost, who was an American writer and writing instructor. And it says, "This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music! The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I am certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this, it is important." And I don't think we could better sum up why it's so important to play with structure and form. So I wanted to take an example of a brand that I think do this really well. It's Babble. They are a kind of foreign language learning facility. On the left-hand side there is a screenshot from their website. And you can see that simply by using what we would call components, they've broken up their website into these really easy to digest sections. Nobody wants to sit and read a big wall of text, especially on a screen. But I can look at this and feel like the content is well structured, and by using really specific headlines, I also know exactly where I'm going. I can understand more about the business, or I can see why other people like it, or I can hop straight to the app if that's what I'm more interested in. When you actually get into the content itself, they also really exemplify this use of long and short sentences. So why Babble? Well, that's a catchy headline, and it's the thing that I probably want to know as a user or a potential user. Then they start off with a slightly longer sentence. When you learn a new language, you want to be able to actually use it with real people in the real world. Every part of Babble is designed with that goal in mind. So they've got a really lovely mixture, just 4 sentences to sum up their company ethos. It's friendly. I kind of feel like I know them. And then rather than the generic CTAs like find out more, learn more, or click here, they've gone with the Babble method. And suddenly that's kind of something that I want to know about. It tells me exactly what I'm going to find on the other end, which, as Kiera spoke about earlier, is a really fundamental part of accessibility. If somebody uses what we call a screen reader, so perhaps they have neurodiversity challenges and they are not physically reading the screen themselves, if you've got a load of links on your page that say, click here, find out more, or learn more, it's not going to mean anything to the tool that they're using. Even if somebody has no neurodiversity challenges, why not take the opportunity to make a bit of microcopy more exciting? There's always an opportunity there to kind of add a little bit of a creative twist. On that subject, actually, I would also be cautious of using overused words like urgent or important. They're the kind of little bits of language that so many of us have become really immune to. Instead, you could try adding a word like now or today to your CTA, and that's actually enough to double your click-through rate without really applying any pressure. So that's a couple of handy tips on structure and form. Easy to digest pieces, long and short sentences, and avoiding generic words. There are so many tools that you can find online for improving how you write. They are endless, and I won't go into all of them. But these are 3 that I like and that I'd say we use quite a lot. The first one is the power of 3. Think of phrases like yesterday, today, and tomorrow, here, there, and everywhere, hook, line, and sinker. It's a holy trinity. It's a really natural way of talking about a product or a service while adding some flair. at work, we often say that our app is quick, safe, and simple to use. There's just something about that rhythm of 3 that's really memorable and digestible to a customer, and it stops you going off on a tangent while making sure that what you're telling people are 3 specific, differentiated things that they actually want to know. So next time you're struggling to finish a sentence, try a little power of 3 and see if it helps. The next tool that I love is use of numbers. We know from our customer research that if we've got a lot of things to tell somebody, breaking it down into some kind of listicle, it makes it really easy to digest, and it makes it much, much more likely that a customer is going to stay with us further down the journey. What you can try doing is using an unusual number. BuzzFeed are absolute masters of this. The 9.5 ways of doing something, or the top 13 X, Y, or Z. By choosing a number that's not a 5 or a 10, there's some kind of authority bias that comes into play, where you think, or whatever somebody is telling me must be really, really important because they've refined it or they've added an extra one on, and it means that I just can't miss it. Obviously, that's why Kiera and I went for 7 copywriting principles you just have to know. Had we said 10, you might have thought, okay, 10, sure. But 7, you instantly think they must be really refined and well chosen. And lastly, one of my other favorite pieces of advice is to really set expectations. If you're going to be asking a customer to do something, why not tell them how long it's going to take them to do, or tell them what to expect on their journey, or what they might need to hand before they start. It's one of the ways that you can kind of mitigate a slightly less pleasant user experience by just kind of letting them know what's coming up. So those are my really simple tips for improving your structure and your form as you're writing. And that is the end of our kind of set of advice. We've put together some resources, and we thought what you might want to do if you've got a screen in front of you is just take a quick screenshot. I won't rattle them all off. There's a lovely mix. Obviously, first up, we'll say if you're a charity, organisation, or NGO, Ethical Angel is absolutely there for you to team you up with a buddy from a corporation who might be able to give you the skills and expertise that you're looking for. There's also newsletters. They're actually one of my favourite ways of getting daily or weekly gobbets that you can digest and learn more about without having to sit down with a whole book. I really recommend that. There's also some amazing agencies that do courses. D&AD is absolutely my favourite. There's websites. The Drum is a particularly good one. A whole list of books there. Some style guides, actually, which if your company doesn't have a style guide, there's some kind of ones that you can get into and have a little look around and see how some other people do it. And my last and probably most important piece of advice would be to read. And I truly believe that in the same way that you learn to listen before you learn to speak, you really must become a great reader before you can become any kind of competent writer. It is the absolute best way to hone your ear. So start a book club, bring a word corner into your team meetings, or send around bits of copy that has inspired you. Share your passion for reading and writing with those around you, and you can only get better. And that gives us just 5 minutes actually for a Q&A at the end. You might have sent questions over the course of the session. Lucy, is there anything that has cropped up?
Yeah, so we've got 3 questions, all anonymous, but the first one is, do you have any recommendations for ultra small charities in getting copy checked, proofed, read? We have a small number of volunteers with 1 to 2 doing the core work. One person can write draft copy, but it is really hard to then get a second person to help review or edit it.
Well, that's definitely a resourcing challenge. Probably is just going to need an extra pair of eyes, to be honest. It's very difficult to know how else to do it. You can use tools, online tools. Obviously, there's things like spell check, but you can use other ones that will comb your copy more thoroughly. What I would suggest, perhaps, if you haven't got the manpower, is to try and give yourself the time power. So write something and give yourself perhaps a couple of days away from it. Go back and review it. If you can't get somebody else to look at all of it, maybe you can get them to look at the most important pieces. headlines, CTAs, and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I would struggle to be in that position. We're really, really grateful to have a team of 12 writers, which is why we're able to share the load. But obviously I appreciate when it's just you, it's a lot harder, and it's almost like writing something for yourself. But definitely physically try and take the break from it, try and take the screen break. Even actually for me, one of the things that helps is to write on a screen and to print out and have a physical copy. A hell of a lot more jumps out at you from a page than it does from a screen for some reason. So yeah, you have my sympathies. That's a tough one.
Great, thank you, Sophie. And then our second question is, do you have any tips for communicating complex messages to a wide audience? For example, sharing a message based on scientific data to social media followers?
If it's social media, I would recommend infographics. I definitely think anything that you can do that's any kind of visual aid can only help. You could try breaking it down into like a mini series. So using that kind of numbered approach to give it some structure. They would probably be my top two pieces of advice. You don't need to tell them everything all in one go, particularly if it's over social. Try and find that way, I guess, of making it as bite-sized and digestible as possible.
Yeah, I think like we said earlier in the presentation, like if you can sort of make it as a layperson would be able to understand it, make it as simple as you can. I appreciate that might be hard if, you know, science writing isn't your thing, but just even asking someone who's doesn't work with you, maybe like a family member or a friend, reading it to them, seeing if they can understand it, that might help you to break it down a little bit more.
Yeah, and I would say also it's another time to really pull out your hero messaging. If there are 3 things from that you really want people to take away, put those up front. It's not going to be about bombarding them in one great big hit.
Great, thank you. And our third and final question, slightly similar, but a question on target audience. My charity has 4 different target audiences. Is it easy to segment via email? But what advice could you give when writing messages for social media? Thanks.
So we at work quite often come up with personas. So we will kind of almost design somebody to sit inside each of those target audiences, and then make sure that we write to each of them. You can't please everybody. You just can't. We get lots of backlash on social media for all sorts of different things. So I wouldn't worry too much if somebody doesn't like it. I guess the biggest mistake I see with segmentation is that people think everyone's wildly different. We have more wealthy audiences, and there is a tendency to write in this really formal language as though somebody who's wealthy and older must be formal and stuffy. So I would say get to know those audiences and don't make assumptions about them, because chances are that something that resonates with a 35-year-old will probably also resonate with a 65-year-old. It might not be quite as different as you think. So get to know what's important to each of them. But don't make any assumptions about them. Yeah.
Get to know them as a real person, like we said, and don't make the mistake that NatWest made with the Mr. Bunker. Yeah, just try and think of all those segments as one person, someone that you know in real life, and that might help you make a more sort of genuine connection with your copy.
Right, guys, thank you. I'm just conscious of time, so I just wanted to close up here with some closing remarks. Thank you so much to all attendees for joining today, and thanks to Kiera and Sophie for this insightful and interactive copywriting masterclass. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We'll be sending out a feedback form following the session, so please let us know your thoughts and where we can improve. As mentioned, Ethical Angel is a community where you can access support from professionals like Kiera and Sophie on a one-to-one basis. So if you're looking for some more support with audience analysis, designing those infographics for your social, copywriting in general, you can sign up to Ethical Angel for free. Simply sign up and